Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Gretchen, and today I'm back with another Women's Prize for Nonfiction review, and today's pick is the shortlisted Doppelganger by Naomi Klein. Now, this was a very interesting read, and it's one of those books that I think is going to be very polarizing. And the reason that I say that is because it has heavy political themes throughout the duration of the book, and it all comes down to this doppelganger or mirror world concept that Naomi Klein introduces us to about her relationship with being confused for somebody that is on the opposite side of the author's political viewpoints. So we have Naomi Klein, who is very liberal, and then we have her doppelganger, who is someone by the name of Naomi Wolf, who is considered to be far right and also a conspiracy theorist. So we definitely have a lot of political talk throughout the duration of this book. Now, for me personally, I don't care what the subject of the book is. I don't care what viewpoints the author has, whether it's liberal or conservative. I hate reading nonfiction that is political in any way. I prefer memoir, I prefer science-based. With political nonfiction, I feel like a kid that is stuck in the middle of a bad divorce and mom and dad are fighting for my attention, and I just feel awkward, I feel confused. I don't like seeing one side of the story in a book. My preferred way to absorb politics is debate and hearing both sides of the story. Anytime I'm reading a book that is political, whether it's leaning left or whether it's leaning right, I'm only hearing that author's viewpoints. And in order for me to make a decision about what I think of the work, I think that it's only fair that the other side gets to argue as well. And that is personally why I don't like to read political fiction. I'm not saying I don't lean on one side of the spectrum. Of course I do. But I don't like only getting one-sided information, and anytime that I'm reading political nonfiction, like I said, it just makes me feel uncomfortable. Now, because this was so political, it was definitely not my favorite read, but I can see its merits, and I think that the author did a really good job at times, and there were times where it was kind of a stretch for her to get to the point that she was trying to make. Now, the title of this book, also Doppelganger, to me was very misleading. I was looking for a book about doppelgangers. I would love to read a book about doppelgangers, the history of doppelgangers, doppelgangers throughout our history, folklore, mythology, all of that kind of stuff. I would love that. So if you know of a good doppelganger book that's really about doppelgangers, let me know because I'd love to read it. But this book, Doppelganger, is used loosely in the sense that we have Naomi Klein, the author, that during the pandemic was frequently getting confused with another author named Naomi Wolf. And it was never an issue prior to COVID or prior to the 2020 election in the States for Naomi Klein to be confused with Naomi Wolf. At the time, prior to all of that, Naomi Wolf was a very liberal person herself. She was very feminist. She had very progressive and left-leaning ideology, and it very closely aligned with Klein. Now, where Klein started to struggle with the comparisons and the confusion was that as time went on, Woolf increasingly started to slide to the other side of the political spectrum and become more right-wing, more conservative, more not just right-wing, but alt-right, and also very heavily involved with conspiracy theorists and a close colleague and friend of Steve Bannon. Now, once that started to happen, Klein started to get very concerned because she was getting mistaken for these, what she considered crazy ideas, and didn't want to be associated with them. And she was very concerned and very quickly would correct anybody that, came along that was making that mistaken identity between the two. So really, the book goes into detail about how she came to write the book, why she felt compelled to write the book. She does go into a bit of detail on, doppelgangers, which was fun. I did enjoy that part. And then she starts to talk about this concept that she has of the mirror world. And from there, she goes and takes different subjects, different current affairs, and she tries to thread them together and explain them through the concept of a doppelganger and this mirror world concept that she has. So for example, she does a chapter on autism, she does a chapter on vaccination, she does a chapter on the election. So she does go into a lot of detail once she gets into those specific sections. And in each of them, she is trying to tie a common thread between them and really frame it in that doppelganger sense or that mirror world sense is what she calls it, where you have the good side and you have the bad side. You have the Jekyll, you have the Hyde. And there were a lot of times where I will say she hit the mark. She did a really good job of presenting her argument. She had a lot of information to back it up. She showed her work, basically. And then there were other times when, although the topics she was talking about were interesting, in order for her to tie it back to that whole doppelganger concept, it was a bit of a stretch. Like, you could really see her reaching for some of those connections. And she was making connections that possibly weren't actually even there, but she made them up for the sake of the book, which I get it, but that was a part that was really upsetting, or I shouldn't say upsetting, but that was a part that was really disappointing for me, because she had such strong arguments for some, and then other ones she just seemed like she kind of phoned it in. And I'm curious if any of you have read this, if you felt that there were stronger arguments in some chapters versus others, or maybe it was that I just wasn't grasping or really seeing the correlation between the topic or subject she was discussing and doppelgangers. But alas, there were parts of the book I found very interesting and compelling. It definitely gave me a lot to think about. There were not many chapters that I didn't kind of stop and go, and really ponder things and think about. But what I will say is, the second I finished this book, I forgot about it. There really wasn't anything in it that made me continue to think about it after the fact. And one of the other experiences that I had with reading this book is she made a lot of really strong arguments and a lot of strong points along the way. And anytime I read a book that is about a certain subject, when I get to the end of the book like this, I'm expecting there to be some tidying up. I'm expecting all of those arguments to come together with not just the lessons that we've learned previously, but also to kind of tie it together and give me one last huge moral or question to ponder. And this book didn't do that for me. It gave me things to question and it gave me things to ponder, but it was at the end of each of the chapters. And then once I got to the end of the book, I didn't really feel like it was tied together. I didn't feel like it was presented in a way that gave me anything else new to think about. So because of that, I ended up finishing the book without really continuing to think about it. I had already finished the other chapters and had time to ruminate and process on what I had read before. So by the time I got to the end, it was just really flat for me, and I no longer wanted to think about the book anymore after it was finished. So I will say that that was disappointing for me. I think that this book definitely is going to be an interesting read for a lot of people. And I also say that your enjoyment level of this book is definitely going to be higher if you obviously fall in line with the political beliefs of Naomi Klein. If you are on the conservative side of the coin, a lot of her arguments and a lot of what she's talking about is going to be very emotional for you to get through, and it's going to be a tough read for you. And on the opposite side of that, for those of you that do fall in line with Naomi Klein's side, when you're hearing about everything she experienced, or when we're learning about Naomi Wolf and her transition from leftist feminist to far-right conspiracy theorist, that's going to have an emotional impact on you as well. So I think regardless of what side of the political spectrum you are on, this is definitely going to be a read that will challenge you. And I can definitely see why this book made the long list and ultimately the short list. I think that it's going to give readers a lot to think about. It's going to have people talking, regardless of what side you are on. It's going to get those discussions going, and it's going to make people think, which I think is great for any nonfiction work. But like I said, if this had been less about politics or less focused on political beliefs or marketed in a different way, I think that I would have appreciated the book a lot more. I really, like I said, I wanted that book about doppelgangers. I wanted to learn more about that, and that is 100% on me. I am disappointed because of my expectations, and I should have investigated further before reading this book to know what I was getting into, and not going into it expecting something completely different than what it was going to deliver. So I'm not sure if that's on me or whether or not that's part of the marketing of the book, but at the end of the day, I think I settled on a 3.5 for this book. Let me double check my list there. Yeah, I settled on a 3.5. I am honestly hoping that this doesn't win. I really have better or stronger emotional attachments to some of the other books. I am actively reading one so there's 2 additional shortlisted titles that I have yet to do reviews for. The first one is A Flat Place, which I am actively reading and enjoying, and the second is Codependent, which I am almost done with. So once I get those 2 final reviews out, I will make a video talking about what I think the winner will be. But yeah, this book wasn't my favorite. It wasn't the worst book I've ever read. I think that my enjoyment level of this book truly was impacted by my expectations and what I thought the book would be versus what it actually was. And like I said, I don't know if that's on me or if that's on how the book was marketed, but regardless, it is what it is. So I'm really curious to hear if anyone else out there had the same experience as I did, where you thought that the book was going to be something completely different than what it delivered. And if you did that kind of change the way you felt about the book or your overall enjoyment of the book? So we're still going strong with the Women's Prize for Nonfiction. There are still 2 additional books that I have to provide reviews for. I have to review A Flat Place, which I am about halfway through, and Codependent, which I am almost finished with. I'm hoping to actually finish that book later today. So I will get those last 2 reviews out as soon as possible. And then I will do an overall prediction video for what I think will be the overall winner of the Women's Prize for Nonfiction. So still more content to come related to this prize. And until we read again, bye.